I am Deb Coviello, the Drop-In CEO. And again, I want to welcome you to the show where week after week I find the most amazing leaders who share their insights with you and hopefully inspire you. And just know I do this week after week because I sincerely care about you to help you navigate your challenges and opportunities with confidence based on these conversations and insights that we have. And this week, it is my pleasure to introduce to you and share the mic with Ashish Gupta, who is the founder and CEO of ScaleUpExec. Welcome to the show, Ashish.
Thanks so much for having me, Deb. Looking forward to this conversation.
And just to my listeners, what I really, really, really appreciate with Ashish is that he actually found me and was very kind and gentle about positioning who he was, what he wants, what he does, and with a desire to be on the show versus being very salesy. He was very
Mhm.
kind and very focused on building a relationship, but also the fact that his work is in the area of supporting small, medium-sized businesses with support, fractional leadership at the time, at the rate when companies may need that going through a particular transformation. So I am very excited to pass the mic back over to Ashish and share a bit about yourself personally and professionally and the journey that got you to this work now.
Yep, sure. Well, firstly, really honored to be here, and the type of light you're bringing to challenging problems and giving interesting solutions through all these conversations you've had, I thought was quite unique and inspirational. So I'm excited to be here with you. A little bit about my background. I've been in tech most of my career. I was previously the co-founder of a wireless company. I don't know if you've seen in cell phones now, many cell phones have wireless charging built into them. So we actually developed some of the early technology around wireless charging. And it was one of those like starting in a garage type stories, where we had like no money and where just had an interesting idea. And then this is like one of the most challenging technologies to develop. But eventually had some success. We were able to build out the team, and the company eventually did well. It was acquired by Qualcomm, which is a Fortune 500, based out of San Diego. So we ended up shifting to San Diego and helping bring that technology over to their company. After that, I was at Apple in the iPhone operations team in their senior management there, and I was managing a sizable portion of the manufacturing supply chain operations for iPhone and a $2 billion a year budget. So it's quite a fascinating place to be, but it's one of those, I guess you could think of it as like a grand central station where some of the really interesting minds and people of this day, they funnel through Apple and then eventually they end up going off and doing a lot of other interesting things. So it was a very fascinating place just to observe leaders and uh, and what makes great leadership and management. Eventually, I had the entrepreneurial bug again. I quit Apple, and after having spent about a year and a half of trying to find a company to acquire for myself, I came across an e-commerce business. It was distressed, but it had some really interesting characteristics in it. So I acquired it and I spent 4 or 5 years, probably the most challenging years of my life, turning everything around in that business from the team, the culture, the operations, our B2B channels, the B2C channels. Eventually, it did turn around. It was acquired in 2023. And after that, I had the chance to help a couple of small, medium-sized businesses where the founders were stuck. They and their teams were burnt out. The revenues had plateaued. They felt like they had hit a skill set ceiling and they were trying to figure out how to get back on track into a growth mode. And I jumped in as a fractional CEO myself. And within 3, 4 months of retooling every aspect of their businesses, sure enough, did turn around. They grew 30, 40% in just the first 3, 4 months. And the more interesting thing for me was that the team was no longer burnt out and they felt refreshed and motivated. And because of that success, I ended up having more engagements than I could handle myself. And that's when I started Scale Up Exec, which is, it's been about a year and a half now. It's a small team, but these are the gems of COOs that I found after having met hundreds of them through the years. So we dive into all kinds of different contexts and different industries, usually in the small to medium size business space, where either the founders they feel like they're way too stuck in the day-to-day operations and they want to instead shift into a more visionary strategy role, or they want to help getting to an exit for their business or for their own roles, or they feel like their businesses are uh, not going in a direction that they want it to go in, whether that's in terms of growth or stagnation or decline. So we dive in hands-on and help them scale. So that's I guess in summary a brief about some of my working career.
So, very helpful. And like I told you before we jumped on here, I'm going to move forward and understand then how do you help those people with the transformation. But we're going to go back in time a bit. You skipped a few really important details. You brushed it off. I had built this business and sold it to Qualcomm and moved on. Oh my, how did you feel about building such an entity? I'm sure with a core team and being able to sell it and say, I created this and this value. What did that feel like for you?
Maybe I'm a bit unusual that way. I think I try and live a bit more in the present, and once something is done, you move on and move on to the next thing. But I think the journey that I went through was fascinating. It was firstly, it was like in my early 20s, and it's a time when you feel like you can take on the world, but actually you realize you have a lot of growing up to do. There's so many skills you don't have, whether it's technical or soft skills, in leading people, in selling to people, in overcoming obstacles. And there were probably a dozen times in the journey of that business where we hit something that was so challenging that we felt like, I don't think we're going to be able to move forward. We're going to have to just stop right here. But if you have that mindset of sometimes that naivety actually helps, where you just feel like, okay, I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep pushing through. I'm going to try and find a solution. And eventually, in all of those dozen or so cases, we did find a solution and were able to push through. Whether in some cases it was cash situations, in some cases it was that most of the cases was actually technical situations where there was some problem in the technology that was so challenging to overcome. And for reference, we're trying to send power through the air, which is like never been done much before. Before, I mean, the last time was maybe Nikola Tesla trying to figure it out. But it was a very technically challenging and complex um, product to try and build. So there were many, many challenges throughout all of that. And if you persevere, that was one of my lessons in perseverance, where if you really do have the mindset that, you know what, we're going to go through it. Whatever it is, we're going to find a solution. And I think that really has helped me see that. And thereafter, through my career, I've had so many other difficulties and challenges, especially on the entrepreneurial side, that I've worked through. But I have now have that mindset that nothing is impossible in this world.
Mm.
There is always a path, and it may feel like in the short term that this is a really bad path that I'm going to have to take. That's the only option I have, and it doesn't feel like a good path to go down. But eventually, I've always realized that longer term, it ends up being whatever happened in the past was to help me grow to the next level or to help me evolve.
So inspiring. I mean, anybody listening out there, where I'm sure we have all had challenges at some point, having the right mindset and a can-do attitude will overcome in the end. And even if it doesn't, you learn something, you've grown from the experience. Love it. But I'm going to move, though, a little bit forward. You had the great opportunity to work with Apple. And as you said, it was the grand central of great minds. And you had an opportunity to realize what great leadership was. Is there a particular example or situation or person that exuded great leadership that maybe you can share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned in that experience is that, firstly, I should never try to copy paste somebody
Mm.
else.
Mhm.
Every individual is unique, and it's important to understand who I am and what my natural inclinations and tendencies are, and then utilize them to develop my own style, an authentic style that is relevant for me. I can definitely learn and observe from others. And in that case, at Apple, I saw many interesting uh, aspects of many people that I liked and I tried to learn from and maybe incorporate some of that into myself. But I don't think there was ever one person that I could say, oh, I want to copy paste that person. And I don't think that's relevant for most of us to just copy paste somebody else. We're all unique individuals and we all have our own strengths and areas of development. And there's an authenticity that can come out through the middle of all of that once we start developing ourselves and understanding ourselves. So, like for example, one of my managers, she had this really interesting quality where even though she um, managed a huge team, she was probably one of the best employees that somebody could find. not just a manager, but one of the best employees. Meaning that whenever I observed her, how she interacted to her manager, she would always think like two steps ahead. So before ever going to a meeting where she was presenting something to her manager, she already understood her manager's mindset and how they would think through things to such a level that before they even ask a question, she's already solved it before she even goes to present something to her. And she's already thinking, well, what else might this person think, what my manager think of or want to see? And she's already done it. Like everything's done. So now when she goes and presents to her manager, it's like a 5 minute meeting, and the manager is content and happy with the direction everything's going in, and there's no questions. So I was like, wow, this is an amazing quality to have, where in order to be the best manager, you actually should be the best follower. That was, I think, one of those core lessons that I learned from that
Mm.
individual.
But I also pick up from what you say as a tremendous strategic thinker, because strategy is always, okay, you may have a plan, but you also have to look at the playing field or the conditions and anticipate changes. So if plan A does not work, you always have to plan B. I know I'm a curler, I throw stones on ice, and I may have a plan or a strategy, but if the stones don't wind up where I want, and my opponent does something different, I have to, and my husband tells me, be thinking one or two or three steps ahead in order to have the advantage. So, really great insights. But I'm going to poke again a little bit more. You talked about when you had your first company and you said naivety was probably your best friend. And so you just muscled through. But then you said you got the entrepreneurial spirit and acquired another company and had lots of challenges. Did that same can-do attitude get you through that, or did you have to apply different skills in order to turn that company around and grow it?
Yeah, I think as time goes on and through different experiences of life, there are different uh, traits that you need to bring out. And what might have worked at certain time in life may not be relevant at other times of life, or it might be relevant. So I think it's always important to understand the context of the situation you're in to try and see maybe that lesson that I had in the past, is it still relevant right now, or is there something that needs to evolve in that lesson? And for example, in this company, when I first joined on, there was already a team that existed.
Okay.
And what I realized quite early on is that that team had a very different mindset in terms of what they wanted from their careers than what the business needed now. So the business had, like I mentioned, it was a distressed business that had been on decline for the prior couple of years. And quite quickly, I understood that one of the reasons it was on decline is that this had become a lifestyle business for everybody. Meaning that they would copy paste month over month what they did. There was no innovation, no questioning, no thinking, well, if I'm doing something today exactly as I was doing it 1 year ago, maybe there is an opportunity that I'm missing. Maybe there could have been some improvement somewhere or a different way of thinking about things. And the world is always evolving. And if a business doesn't keep on evolving, at some point it's going to die. I don't think that that's a natural property of this universe, that there's always evolution happening. And so if you're ever in a space where there's stagnation, at some point that's going to die. And so I actually had this mindset, and maybe because I'd never been through this type of environment before, I always had the mindset that people are first, and that you should do everything that you can to ensure that your team is happy and they're feeling good about the situation that they're in. And I actually spent the first year of being in that business forgetting about revenues, but just putting all my time in trying to help the team transition from being in a culture of lifestyle to being in a culture of innovation and growth and scaling. And that requires a different mindset from people, and it requires something that perhaps they hadn't signed up for. And it was very difficult for me to make that change. When they had originally signed up for their job, they had expected a lifestyle business, and now all of a sudden their context has changed. So
Mm.
after a year of trying to work with that original team to change the culture to what I felt was needed, I realized I was actually doing us a disservice, not just to the business, but also to them. That's not what they wanted. And then the business was suffering because of it. And so eventually, I actually had to make a very difficult decision. I had to let go of 95% of their team and then rehire a whole new team. And now, when I rehired with that new culture right from the get-go to make sure that everybody knew what they were getting into. And in that middle of that transition, I actually took on most of the key roles in the company myself so I could hands-on learn. what happens at every detail and every aspect of the business. So now when somebody else does come in, I actually can manage them and help guide them and ensure their success from a much more um, hands-on point of view, from a view of me actually knowing what happens in the details in the business rather than otherwise. So, that's something that that context I'd never been in before. And so it was a painful learning. And eventually, once I did change the team, that's when the business started going in the right direction. And I started thinking to myself, why didn't I do this before? I did a disservice both to the business as well as the team. And so since then, I've started thinking, well, actually, in any business, the company is first and people are a close second. That's kind of counter to what most people say. But if the business is not doing well, then it's not able to provide it won't be able to provide a good context for the people to work in. And yeah, it might be different view than what most people think, but at least that's what I'd learned
But
and had to painfully work through.
but it almost feels like you approached it from a people first perspective versus a company first and a people a close second. Help me with that distinction because you really focused on having the right people on the bus and supporting them.
Yeah, so the order that I had to eventually think about it is what is the culture that the company needs
Mhm.
in order to get to where it needs to be? So first starting with what the needs of the
The
business were.
business are. I get
Yeah,
it.
so if I
Okay.
knew what the needs were, the business were, now I try and find who are the right set of people that would be applicable to that context and would feel motivated in that context, rather than first saying, okay, here's a great set of people. Now let's figure out how to get the business in the right direction. Instead, start the other way. What does the business need? And then now find the right people that will be relevant for that context.
All right, so beautiful. And this is really valuable to me to really understand your deep background and also your thought leadership. Because, again, at the end of the day, you and I may be having a conversation, other people are listening, but it's about you and I building a relationship because you never know how we might be able to support each other. So let's now shine a light on the work that you do at Scale Up Exec. You've already talked about who is that founder that's stuck, maybe wants an exit. They're feeling a lot of pain. The company is not thriving. But I'm curious, as you then allocate fractional COO resources, what is your approach to entering in those situations and ultimately helping those leaders to get to a place of peace of mind?
Yeah, I think one of the first steps is to really understand what that founder or CEO desires. Uh, Most people at superficial level will say, oh, for my business, I want it to grow. But if you start digging into the next level of detail of why they want it to grow, what is the reason that they want it to grow? And by the way, growth usually has some implications to it. It often means more time investment, more money investment, whatever else, more thought investment. Um, Eventually, you might actually realize some people, their ambition is to have a nice, stable business. It's not necessarily about growth, but they want to have an income stream that comes in. For other people, their goal might actually be, you know what, I'm burnt out. I've been here for 4 or 5 years, and my mind space is no longer excited or motivated by being here. And so I just want to take a step away and maybe I'll be an advisor. And I want the company to be in a place where it can run without me being there day to day. For other people, they are actually really ambitious and they want that business to grow and they're willing to do what's needed of their own mind space, of their own time, and whatever else is needed to help grow that business. So I think that's one of the first steps is really to dive deeper into people, to ask all the whys, so that eventually you can get to what is it that they really want in their business. Once you know what they really want in their business, if they want stability, if they want growth, if they want their time to be less involved, or if something else. Once you know that, now you can start filling in all the other pictures. So let's say, for example, somebody wants to get out of the day-to-day operations, and maybe they want to get into an advisory role for that business, but they want to make sure there's stability in the team, in the direction it's going in, the right people are in place. So then we'll start figuring out what is on their plate right now. How do you delegate that, or how do you remove some of those things? What does a current team look like? Do they have this capability or the skill sets needed to sustain the business without this person, and so on and so forth?
So right now you say that you have a team of people that you deploy. Do you also yourself practice as a fractional COO, or are you more client facing relationship and you deploy team? How is your current business model working right now?
Yeah, I always like to have at least 1 to 2 engagements myself because I
Mhm.
find it's always relevant to make sure that your own knowledge skill set is constantly evolving and that you have on the ground effort. So like um, if I'm talking with a prospective customer, and I've actually done that work myself, hands-on. I know what's really going to be needed in that context. Then I can now find who's the right person in my team that has the right skill set to solve the gaps in that business. Because I've kind of done it and been there, and I know what the gaps really are in those businesses. So I think it's always relevant, at least the way how I think about life, is that it's important for me to always roll up my sleeves and be in there in the trenches myself. And so I always have 1 or 2 engagements myself. And then there's 8 others on the team who are now placed in many different contexts themselves.
Now, you said that over the years you have met many, many, many COOs. What is it about your team that you've carefully curated them? What are some characteristics that make them right for what you're doing versus everybody else?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, that's a really good question. So there's a few things that I've found that makes somebody in my experience a really great COO versus a typical COO. There's a lot of typical COOs out there, and many of them will be the right fit for many contexts. But there's a few that I found, especially when you're fractional, it's a different mindset that you need versus if you're a full-time COO. Firstly, if you're a fractional, you might be working 1, 2, 3 hours a day in a company. So that means in that 1 or 2 or 3 hours, you have to be so efficient and be able to make decisions that are so good that every hour is really valuable impact that you're having on the business. Versus if you have 8 hours in a day and sometimes you can get into this mindset of I have lots of time. I'm going to be able to I'm going to even be able to make bad decisions now and then because I have enough time to course correct eventually. But when you're a fractional and you're there and you're trying to make as much impact in 1 or 2 hours in a day, you have to make sure that every decision that you make is as good a decision as there can be. So what allows you to do that? One thing is that everybody in my team has worked both at startups as well as large enterprises at C-level. And that means in startups, they figured out how to build out hiring plans, how to build out organizations, how to figure out go-to-market strategies, how to pivot when a business needs to pivot. Um, they've also in large enterprises figured out how to build consensus, how to navigate an existing culture that exists, how to get everybody on board when you're trying to go in a certain direction in like a stagnant or long-standing culture. So they've kind of navigated both ends. That's one aspect. The other is that each of them have worked in many different industries. So I often find that if you've worked mostly in one industry in your life, you've got a certain knowledge base. If you worked in many different industries, now the way that you think about life is going to be a bit different. You're often going to be able to bring in best practices from one industry and apply it to another industry where it may never have been done before. You're going to be naturally thinking of growth and learning all the time. So that's the second aspect is they've worked in many different industries so that it's very comfortable or easy for them to get into a new context very quickly. They're just used to jumping into new context very quickly. And then I guess the third is for a COO specifically, it's a bit different role than, let's say, a CFO, Financial Officer. A Chief Financial Officer has to be really good in finance, also in accounting, but they don't have to be really good in HR or tech um, or systems or sales or marketing. And same with like, let's say a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. They have to be really good in marketing, maybe in sales, but they don't have to be good in HR, tech, and all these other things. But a COO actually has to be good in everything. They have to be really good in sales, in marketing, in finance, in hiring, in building organizations and teams, and in all the different aspects needed. So everybody in my team has actually led pretty much every department in a business. So now when they actually jump into any new engagement and they're trying to make a decision, they understand the context of that decision. What will it mean to HR? What will it mean to tech? What will it mean to whatever else? I guess these are three, at least at a high level, three aspects. And then after that, there's like a bunch more that I like to look into and how they think or process or how quickly they can understand different contexts and make decisions on them. So I actually have a very deep vetting process before I bring anybody onto the team.
Thank you for all of that, because this is the first time I have talked to fractional COOs, and only a few companies about that have a team that they will deploy to customers for different things. But this is the first time I've had anybody really, really go through that depth of selection criteria. And just for me personally, again, I'll drop in as mostly like a chief quality officer or a interim quality leader. I've had one assignment where I was the chief operations officer. But I too, while I have been in quality, I do have to understand operations because in order to get I've been like the head of operational excellence also. So knowing what's important to an operations leader, how to, like you say, align with them, negotiate with them, help them out so they can help you. And also, I'll say, because I've had my own business, I've had to be sales and marketing and business, all of that, and then all the client relationships and trust and everything. So um, you've given me a lot of pause and validation for what I've been doing as a business leader and also how I drop in and treat those customers. So, very, very helpful. And I appreciate all that. So, as we start thinking about I'm not quite bringing this to a close yet, but if there is somebody out there that you want to connect with, I mean, talk to them right now, whether it's somebody directly or somebody that might be able to refer to you to explore the opportunity of maybe having a fractional COO. So, who's your ideal person out there that you might want to connect with?
Yeah. I found that the folks that typically find the most value in us are the people who know that they have a goal in mind in their business, and they can see that where they are currently to getting to that goal, there's some gaps that they're not quite sure how to solve. So whether it's in terms of number one, their revenue, number
Mhm.
two, it's in their cost structure or margins, or number three, in their team or organization or processes. If they feel like, okay, I know I want to get here, but I don't know exactly how to navigate the path to get there from where
Right.
we are today, then we could be relevant. A fractional CEO could be relevant to help them get there because a fractional CEO that's really top tier has been and navigated through a lot of these different contexts before. In terms of the size of companies we end up working with, the smallest companies we have are a little less than 1 million in revenue. The largest are around 25, 30 million in revenue. And so it's kind of that small to medium-sized business range. In terms of industry, we're quite industry agnostic. A lot of the things that we solve are not necessarily highly technical situations. Some of them are highly technical situations, but most of them end up being revenue paths, people, organization, systems, processes, or margins. And those are kind of things that a skill set is quite a broad skill set can actually help in uncovering if you've done those kind of things in the past. So I guess the type of business that we might end up helping could be a growing business that's trying to scale to the next level, could be a plateaued business that's having difficulty in getting back on track with growth, or it could be a declining business. Many of our business customers that we have, they're actually in the most toughest situation in their business life cycle, and they need help to get back on track. And we've had dramatic impact. Actually, one of the businesses we're just now getting to the tail end of an engagement because we've kind of worked ourselves out of a job is that when we first started working as a fractional CEO with them, they were losing 350K a month for the prior 18 months before we joined. And they had a full-time CEO in place and they weren't able to navigate how to get back out. Within 3 months of us joining, we got them to net zero and then eventually profitability. And then now they're just about to have a successful exit. So they're in the last few days of getting acquired. So it's kind of interesting. We were able to take them through the whole life cycle of being distressed to being right-sized and then now to getting to an exit in the span of 14 months. So
That's beautiful, but
yeah.
curious. Did you work in partnership with the existing COO to provide the additional capacity or capability, or was there a swap during that
Yeah,
time?
yeah. So actually, when we joined on, our intent was to work with that existing COO. We actually started on a very small plan, like a 1 hour a day plan. Within 3 weeks, the type of value that we were bringing, the CEO said, the CEO noticed the type of value we were bringing in such a small period of time. And she actually requested if we could expand to 4 hours a day. And she let go of her full-time COO. That was definitely not our intent. We weren't trying to go in that direction, but that's what ended up happening. So within 3 weeks, actually, the full-time COO was swapped up. And this was maybe a very dramatic case. This is where the business was in a life or death type situation.
Mm,
And in that case, it was relevant. In many other cases, there is actually a full-time CEO in place, and we complement them.
yeah.
So whether it might be in a skill set complement, like there might be a gap in their skill set, or it could be in their time. They just don't have enough time availability to tackle some really important initiatives. And so we come in and help with that. So we do work in all kinds of different contexts.
All right. Well, this has been a great interview. Again, I'm grateful to have gotten to know you a little bit better and your passion and expertise, and then also the work that ScaleUp is doing for other companies. It's so valuable and it aligns so much with what I do as a fractional quality leader. I'm in
Yeah.
an engagement right now where I see where they're going. They are capacity and capability restrained, but I am dropping in and providing what they need at a critical time in their growth. And I am just can't wait to see where they go. So again, it's very purposeful and rewarding work. And I just am so grateful to know you. But I will pass the mic back to you one last time for any closing thoughts before we bring the show to a close.
Yeah, I think really nice questions that you had. What I would just suggest for any CEO or entrepreneur is actually take some time to self-introspect. What is it that you really want out of your business? And that changes over time. Maybe when you started your business, you had certain goal or trajectory in mind. Maybe now you've had a life change or a life situation. Like let's say some people get married or they get a new kid in their life or something else that requires your context, your business context to change. That's totally okay. It's okay if you no longer need the business to grow, but you want it to be stable, or if you want it to just be status quo. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's important if you just take the time to introspect and figure out what is it that you really want in your business. Now, once you're clear about that, everything else can fall into place, whether you need the help of external folks or your internal team is able to manage. But if you know what direction you want things to go in, everything else starts to align to that.
All right. Well, Ashish, it has been a pleasure to get to know you and only start this relationship and again, shine a light on what you do at Scale Up Exec. I just want to say thank you so much for being a great guest and I wish you well and continued success.
Thank you so much.